Okay. Well, that was all I had to share today. A little bit of a shorter sharing, but I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for discussion and just to kind of ponder kind of what we think about that and how are we doing that. I think is more important than we're not learning super new information here, but just how are we able to do that is what I think we're all wanting to think about more as we kind of live out our lives. So, Suzanne.
Thanks so much, Laura. Such a great topic and a great scriptures that you shared. Thank you so much. I think what helps us so much is to be thoughtful about God's perspective of time. And I love how you were showing that each aspect of time, the past and the present and the future, the scriptures tell us like the right attitude to have, the best attitude to have about the past. I know in Ecclesiastes, it talks a lot about, thinking about the past and dwelling on it and not to like get caught up in thinking about how the good old days were better than now. And it's just like all of these little bits of information in the scriptures help us to get God's perspective of time. And I think that verse in Romans, I think about a lot, Romans 8, where Paul talks about how we really have to consider all the sufferings that humanity has gone through for the last 6,000 years. To God, it's just like a blink of an eye. And yet he is the one that sets the timetable. We might feel like it's been going on for way too long, humanity just suffering, and how God could just look at all these people that are suffering all the time and not do anything about it. So for our perspective of time, we think that God doesn't care, or that he's taking too long. I mean, Peter tells us that we shouldn't consider that all this time is, we shouldn't consider that means God is being slow, but that he's being merciful because he's got a timetable that will allow for him to step in and install his king in ruling over the earth without anyone able to ever object and say, well, we just needed a little more time and then we could have like had world peace. We could have run everything ourselves with all of this technology and all this stuff all this great stuff that we're doing. It's just brilliant of God to let us go off on our own because that's what humans wanted, and to bring it to the brink of where we are going to just destroy ourselves if he doesn't step in. So, I mean, he has to settle this dispute about his sovereignty for eternity. And whatever amount of time, like Jesus said, he already knows the day and the hour. He already knows exactly how long he has to hold back his winds of wrath and judgment against the world in order to solve or resolve this issue. So I feel like whenever we get caught up in feeling that God's taking too long or he's not acting, or why God, like Moses cried in Psalm 90, like, how long, oh God, how long are you going to like make us keep suffering? And that was 4,000 years ago, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like that's what we need, like to be prayerful about. God, just help us to have your sense of time, to have your perspective of why things are happening the way they're happening. And I think that gives us the peace and the joy that we need, is when we just drop back into God's perspective. Yeah, suffering's hard and our lives are short and everything can really suck.
Yeah.
That's just kind of like life. But like Paul said, God subjected the creation to futility. It's God's doing. He subjected us to futility for a purpose. And that's to make us realize that we can't live without him, and to move humanity, move people to reach out to him, and to search for him and grope for him, because he's not far off from each one of us. So, we just have to get God's perspective on it. And that's just, you know, time is in God's hands. It's not ours. So, yeah, this is all very, big picture. And I think it's so important, because otherwise we're just going to be miserable every time something happens in our lives or we see horrible things happen in the world. It really gives us that perspective. So thank you so much, Laura, for
Yeah.
this topic. It's great.
Thanks for your comments. Yeah, lots of thoughts I've had too. So I think we all experience that at times. So it's good to keep it all we're keeping it all in perspective, I think, is what we're thinking about today. Paul.
Thanks, Laura. Well, like Susanna, I also really like this teaching. I think it is a great subject and a very important subject, because we can all be a bit lost from moment to moment and sometimes let things get on top of us and be overwhelmed and days and weeks and months can go past where we think, what's happened with the time or what's going on, so it's so easy. And as you say, we do need to keep these things in perspective and a healthy perspective in our lives, because as you say, if we spend too much time in the past, that's unhealthy, and too much time in the future, that's unhealthy. Worrying about tomorrow, it robs us. It actually robs us of our lives, which is only in the present. So it's and yeah, and it's just can have so many negative impacts on our lives. So yeah, really good subject. And yeah, I think you hit on the nail on the head. We can plan for the future, and we should plan for the future, not in the way of forgetting God, like the people that say, let's go to that city and make business and come back, not like that, but more knowing, having a direction for the future, and actually making some plans for that, and bringing that down into small steps that you can busy yourself with each day and moving towards. you know we can do those, and that those things, if they're aligned with God's will, then we can busy our days with these good things that contribute to the kingdom. Um, so we do have to get good at that, rather than just taking each day as it comes, um, which you can do at times. You don't have to be busy all the time. It's it really depends, but anything unhealthy would spend too much time in the future, too much in the past. You know, spend a little bit of time planning, but then we spend the days living and working towards these things that we're doing for God and aligned with God's will. And as you say, learning from the past rather than rose-tinted glasses or worrying and thinking about the past negatively, because that time has gone and it's robbing you of your life now, spending your time thinking about those, you know. And as you say, remembering the good things, absolutely, and remembering the hope for the future, these are things that keep us going, and make us grateful to God. So I think that you hit the nail on the head again there, that how important those are, for keeping us going. But other than that, it's, we've got to slow down a bit as well. We put an awful burden on ourselves with what we try to do or think we need to do each day. But if we don't plan for tomorrow, these things will just hit us left, right, and center without being able to manage them properly. So we do need to do that. And I think that this is a great teaching and some very worthwhile things that you've mentioned there that I think are well worth pondering, no matter what point we're at in life, whether younger or older or whatever. There's never a bad time to start using our days properly, you know.
Mm.
So thank you for that, Laura. I really appreciate it.
Mm. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. And I think you said something that summed it up pretty well, where you said dwelling too much on the past or the future robs us of the life of our life, which we have in the present. So I think that's kind of a kind of a good summary of some of the things we've talked about so far. So that was a good one. Anyone else have a comment or question or something to add to what we discussed today?
I'd like to say something about it. I was thinking that, this idea of, living in the, I don't know, you want to call it the eternal now. I don't know. I know I've heard that phrase. I mean, this is real. If the mind of Christ was a certain number of thoughts, I mean, pressing on toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus, because you've forgotten the past and you're reaching forward, as it says in Philippians 3:13 and 14. I mean, it's a pretty, I don't know, it's one of the top ideas or thoughts, if you ask me. I mean, it's really you know, I mean, so many people in our society, have, mental problems. And, it's like, you just have to let go of the past. You can't feel guilty about your past. And so many of us that are born again, our lives have changed. And, it's like, all right, so, that was you at one time. There's also verses that tell us to remember our past lives every once in a while. I mean, and there's a good reason for that. I think that brings about, thankfulness for, I know just earlier this morning, I was thinking that, and thinking, yeah, I'm really glad I'm not what I was, you know,
Mhm.
and it's just a really important set of ideas that God gives us.
Good thoughts, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, it's important to remember so we don't, we can be thankful there. I think there is, see how far you've come type thing, somewhere in the New Testament. So it is really a good thing to reflect on that from time to time. Steve and Phyllis?
Laura, I was just, as we're all talking here, and you're thinking about all the billions of people who have lived and even passed away, and you got billions here on the earth today, and everybody is exercising their own free will, and yet the sovereignty of God is going to end up exactly the way He said it would. I mean, feuds, wars, craziness, drama, his kingdom is moving forward. Things are moving forward. And that is just a awesome thought. And looking back and what that can do for us, and looking forward and what that does for us, just realizing his sovereignty gives us the courage and the perseverance and whatever we need to live in this present reality. Um, the grace of God, it's about the grace of God. And also something I was thinking about, many times we can say these things to others and with full confidence. And yet sometimes when it comes to our own personal selves, it sounds like, or it's not just sounding like, we can have moments of doubt. But that's why we have his spirit. He left us this gift of spirit to remind us of all of this, to open our eyes to all of this so that we can live in today's reality. And I'm not saying don't look it's the future, knowing what he has promised, that opens my eyes on how I can navigate through this present time. Because this present time it's not easy.
Yes.
Yeah, but it is doable according to what he has promised. And so I just, by his spirit, I just ask him, help me, to believe this. And one more thing, Steve and I were talking about something this morning and how we can know something, but practicing it is very different, Even something as simple as a diet, I can know what benefits me and what hurts me. But practicing it, that comes at a cost. And I guess all of this is just tied in. And that's what I love about the Word of God. It's not a one, it all ties in. Thanks, Laura. This is huge, and oh my goodness, so much.
Thank you, Phyllis. Thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. Okay. Kenny?
Hey everyone. Yeah, something that I've thought about this subject a lot is just kind of finding the balance because yeah, we want to remember the past and those that have come before us, and we need to plan for the future instead of just being haphazard. But largely, we can be preoccupied with focusing too much on those rather than in the present. Something I've been doing recently is just getting out and kind of exploring some of the countryside around us. We live in a pretty big county and it's a lot of rural areas, but as I'm going through these different, kind of dirt roads that hardly anyone's ever down, come across like these old abandoned, like small little church buildings, and then like cemeteries, and then sometimes like the church buildings even like gone. There's just like this cemetery that's like out in the middle of this field that's just overgrown with weeds. No one's keeping it up or anything. It's kind of a interesting thing to realize. Like there's all these people that have lived and they had their whole lives, and now the only thing that probably anyone remembers is maybe a distant memory of like a great grandparent, or it may just be the only thing left of their life as a mark. Is just this marker out in a field that no one even looks at or pays attention to or mows. So it's interesting, like our lives go by quickly, and in a couple hundred years, probably no one will remember any of us at all, right? Like unless we do something really, really noteworthy in the world. But God remembers what we do, and God, will remember what our lives were, and if we focused our time that we had on the right things or not. And yeah, it's kind of a sobering thing to think about. Like, days are short, life goes by quick, and outside of making something noteworthy for God to remember us and resurrect us for the kingdom, there's really not a lot else in life, so it's an interesting thing to think about, how quickly things go by, and like to make make use of every day and make the most of it, and to be mindful of our present time. And we don't want to be looking back saying that we missed out on time, but we probably will at some point. It's just unavoidable. But do the best we can and not let that happen to us, where we can look back at the end of our lives and say we made the most of it. We did the best we could for God for the most amount of days that we could, and we're proud of that, and God will remember us in the kingdom. And we have great joy in that, and we can have great peace and hope in that, where the rest of the world really doesn't. It's a lot to think about, but something I've thought about a lot over the years. And yeah, just going by recently and seeing all these old cemeteries, I like really started thinking about it. It's like, this is really kind of interesting. Anyway, just wanted to share that.
Oh, thank you. That was good. So good. I feel like just knowing the things that really matter in life, having sense of purpose really helps keep you grounded in your present. Like, what should I be doing in the present? The things that matter. What God, being with God, being present with Him, doing what He wants you to do. So, really good reminder. Thank you. Donna.
Kenny, you just reminded me of, when we think of leaving a legacy, we're thinking of all, we're Abraham Lincoln, we're thinking a lot of things, and he did leave a legacy. in his memoirs, and so did famous people. But the Bible talks about in Hebrews 11 all these giants of the faith, and yet we're just like them, flesh, and I thought of Dustin's book and how many times he says, coming alive in today, not just the resurrection in the future, but coming alive. You were alive because of we think so different than the world. And it's meant to be that we are thinking differently because we have, the mind of Christ in us has given us, a wholesome way of seeing God in a desert, that because Satan owns the world. God's not there yet, but he will be in the future through Jesus Christ. And just knowing these truths excavates for us, a wholesomeness that we can leave a legacy, even with your children. Like my mom and dad, were men and women of faith. I mean, who would not want that? Your kids to say, when you're long gone, in your graves, asleep, waiting for the resurrection, your kids can go on and say, my mom and dad taught me to have faith. That's a legacy. That is leaving a legacy. You don't have to have this shrine, made for you or some statue to remind your children and the world that you made a mark in life. And I don't think we think this way. I think sometimes we need to be told that you do leave a lasting impression on people. I can't tell you the countless people that I think about today from 45 years ago. They are the richest memories of people that spoke into my life, even before I came to Christ. I have never forgotten these early teachers, and they're not famous men and women. They left a legacy and an imprint in my heart to sow into my life even before I was born again, to bring me to this point of embracing Jesus Christ as my Lord and, having lordship over me. And, I'm looking at Nehemiah, and when he says, the joy of the Lord is my strength, Nehemiah 8:10. What did he mean by that? And I think of the joy is a fruit of the Spirit. And I don't think we have to conjure it. I think what Laura is saying gives us great joy. And I woke up this morning and the word in my heart was, you're living with a purpose. And I think this is the word for me today. I don't know what it speaks to you, but living with a purpose. We're not mindless as to why we're alive, and to be given a purpose, even if it's the purpose of being a good neighbor. If that doesn't put a smile on your face, I don't know what's going to do it for you. It doesn't for me that I don't have to do cartwheels and gymnastics in my head because I'm maybe not doing a miracle, or maybe I have. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not collecting data here. But to wake up in the morning and know, that the joy of the Lord can become my strength in every moment of my life, regardless of what is going on in my sphere of influence or my body or my mind. And trust me when I tell you, I think having Holy Spirit, having a community that speaks life, that speaks beautiful scriptures that give us life, very inspirational. We live so differently, and I'm so thankful for having a purpose, and not. I think of people committing suicide, and my heart goes out to them. I am not there. I want to rescue. I want to say, you got a purpose, honey. No matter how bad it is out there, let me talk to you about what can become your main line, your mainstream of having a purpose to wake up in the morning and live life one more day. I love that. Thanks, Laura, for sharing this, finding joy in the present. It's good stuff.
Oh, thank you, Donna. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording now. I hope if you're watching, you'll join us sometime. We have information in the notes. God bless.